Hello and welcome back to our discussion on the Go programming language. So in this lesson, I want us to look at how to write and call functions. So let's quickly make a directory. Let's call this functions. Let's navigate into that directory, go into that directory. Let me make a main file and let me create a module. Okay, so go mod tidy. All right, and so I'm going to open this in this directory in Visual Studio Code. All right. Now, I will only look at the basics of functions since you have already studied functions extensively in C++. I will only differentiate the differences that you should be mindful of. Okay, let's create a package. We only will be needing FMT. All right, and so of course we have our main. Now, whenever we create functions, we tend to create them above main. Okay, so let's start off by creating a simple function named say hello. Okay, say hello, prints hello there. All right, now to create a function, we start with the func keyword. And we need to follow that by the name of the function. So let's call this function, say hello. And for now, this function does not take any parameters. So also it does not return any values. So all I wanted to do is to print hello there. Okay. And this is a proper hold on, string. Okay. So this is a proper function in Go. All we have to do is to call this function in main. And we all know how to call a function, right? With the parenthesis. All right, and so we could actually check and run this function. So let's see if it works. Go run main.go. And it returns, excuse me, hello world. Great, so that's one type of function that you can write. Another type of function that you can write is a function that accepts a parameter. Excuse me. Let's call this one print my parameters. Okay. Print my parameters prints the values of the parameters, right? So this one will print something, but it will also accept something. So let's call it func print my parameters, And now we have to know how do we accept arguments, parameters. How do we create a function that has parameters where we'll pass in something? That's straightforward. Let's create our variable. Let's call it maybe x, and it will be of type, let's say, int. And we have another variable we will call y of type int. Okay. Now, just try to know both ways. In many instances, when you have parameters of the same type, you can put only one type. You can say x comma y, and then at the end you put the int. All right. But I will be explicit, and I will say x int, y int. Okay. This function will not return anything. It will simply print. Okay. So fmt dot print x, and then fmt dot print y. All right. And so we could call this function by saying print parameters, and let's pass it the value maybe 2 and the value 5. Right. Okay, so notice we don't use any semicolons or any of that in Go as you do in your C++ programs. All right, so this is the function. We're calling this function, which is this one. And so if I open my terminal, and I run it again, let's see, go run main.go. Notice we get the parameters printed. Great. So that's a function that accepts parameters and prints the whatever they are. Now let's create another function which does not accept any parameters, but it returns something. So let's say return a word. Okay, so let's call this function send message. Okay, so send message returns a word. Okay, so I have my function named func. It's named send message. It doesn't accept anything. However, it returns a word. It returns a string. So to specify a return, to specify that the function returns something, we put the type outside. So we're going to say string. We don't need to give it a variable name. Okay, so the compiler will know that something, a string, should be returned from this function. Okay, now after we specify the return type, then we put the curly brace. And so now we can say return, let's create a string, what's a word, quidnunc. Okay, all right. So this is a function that does not take any parameters, but it returns one thing. And we can verify that by saying send message, but we have to accept what it sends or print it. Okay, so we could say fmt dot print, right, send message. Okay, that can work. The return value is immediately printed, but we could also save the return value. Okay, we could say send message, and this is where the shorthand notation comes in. We could say result colon equal. Notice I don't care what the type that was returned, because the variable that I use to collect it, to save it in, could be, will match the type returned. So if I return a string, result will hold a string. If I return an int, result will hold an int. Okay, and that's the beauty of the shorthand notation. Okay, and then of course, to make the compiler not complain, I'll have to print result. Okay, and if I run this, right, we see that we get the desired result. Okay, so that's a function that does not take any arguments and does not have any parameters, but it returns something. Let's look at the other kind. Okay, we only have one other option, which is functions that accept things and return things. Okay, so let's say this one is increment, maybe increment parameters. Okay, so increment parameter returns the parameters incremented. Okay, so great. Func increment parameters. We're going to call the first one x of type int. Okay. The second one y of type int. And it will return, notice I put parentheses now because it's more than one. So it will return an int and it will return an int. So it will return two ints. Okay. So it will return two ints. That's why I have two types inside parentheses. When it's only one type returned, you don't need the parenthesis. Although if you put this in parentheses, it will still be correct. Okay, so now the body, I will simply say x is x plus 1, y is y plus 1, and then I will return x comma y. So notice in Go, unlike C++, I can return multiple values from a function. All right, I can return multiple values from a function. All right, and so let's check this function. I could say increment parameter. Let's give it 6 and let's give it 7. It will return something. It will return two things. And so I can simply say answer 1 comma answer 2 equal. Okay, so all I do is to have two variables. This one will accept the first return value x, and this one will accept the second return value y. So we should expect that answer 1 will print 7 and answer 2 will print 8. So let's print answer 1 comma answer 2. Okay, so let's run our function. Go run. Okay, and we have 7 and we have 8 as we expected. Okay, so these are the ways how we create basic functions in Go. All right, so we could have functions that don't accept or don't return anything. functions that accept but don't return anything, functions that don't accept but return something, and the last combination, functions that accept and return things. And unlike C++, you can return multiple values in Go in a very straightforward manner. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this lesson where we look at basic functions. There are other types of functions such as closure. We can use functions to deal with things like anonymous functions. We could have closures. We could pass in functions into other functions. We could return functions from other functions. However, those topics will be discussed much later. The whole point of these first couple of weeks is just to get you knowledgeable about the Go programming language. Okay, I will see you in the next lesson.